Call the meeting to order and do a roll call.
Jason Tedlock,
Here.
Jessica Conley,
Here.
Sharon Johnson,
Here.
Guy Finley is absent, and Corey Daly.
Here.
We'll seek the approval of the minutes from the June 20, 2023 meeting.
I'll make that motion. I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next up is review the annual PE-300 reports of performance and status of the tax incremental district number 4 as required by Wisconsin statute 66.1105 4M. Adam, sorry.
Sure. So unfortunately, in 2023, we had a deficit again for TID. I can't say it's surprising, but it's certainly unfortunate. Total deficit of $173,881. We did have revenues of, I just gave my copy to, oh, do you have that connected? Yeah. So we did have revenues of $296,997. And then we had expenses of $470,878. So the increment increased just slightly from the year prior, but it was only $1,000 and wasn't enough to offset our principal and interest payments on the debt for the TID. So the TID borrowed $175,225.49 from the electric fund through an interfund loan to cover that deficit. So anything you wanted to add, Chris?
I don't believe at this point.
Chris prepared the report, so he's certainly an expert if you have any in-depth questions. As far as looking forward, we're anticipating another deficit in 2024. And we're unfortunately expecting that deficit's going to increase to $207,144.67. It's somewhat one downside of having the city's mill rate go down is that obviously as the mill rate goes down, the increment being generated is going down. So whereas we had an increment of about $242,000 in 2023, we're expecting that increment to be $213,000 in 24, so decrease of about $30,000. So we recently in May, the council did approve another interfund loan from the electric fund to the TID district to cover the expected shortfall for 2024. So you guys will see that next year on next year's report, but just in terms of giving you a preview as to the health of the TID. The one good thing is that we have had some valuation increases this year, which will show up next year. So the Love's Travel Plaza valuation went up by, it was like 800,000, wasn't it? And then actually might have been more than that, but ironically enough, the shell out there, the half-finished shell, is now valued at 800,000. Before it was only, just the land value basically. So I wouldn't think that building as it is worth that much, but that's what it's been assessed at. So overall, we're expecting, or overall, the assessments have gone up by about $4 million for that district, which is a significant amount. So hopefully that'll help the TID next year. We'll also see what happens with the hotel. The hotel recently sold, which is a concern from a economic development perspective because we don't know how the management is going to be, but from a valuation perspective, it's good because the hotel sold for like $9 or $10 million and it was only assessed at just about $7 million. So that'll get picked up the next valuation next year. So hopefully the TID should see some increases in valuation in the next couple of years, which hopefully should generate some additional increment. And then most, I guess, significantly related to that is obviously Creekside, the housing or the apartment and the mixed-use development that's going up. If you've driven by, you'll see some grading going on, which we're excited about. They still are in the last phase of the zoning and planning approval process. They have to get a specific implementation plan, which is the final part of that. So we're hoping to get that done very, very soon. Just a lot of behind the scenes engineer and architect conversations. So it's above my pay grade. But once that gets approved, then they'll be able to start actually putting up the building. So I know their goal right now is to try to lay the foundations for some of those buildings out there, hopefully by the end of the year. We'll see if that happens. But so the good news is, as far as the future of the TID, once that development starts going up, obviously it's going to help the TID. When we were looking at amending the TID and doing the development agreement, originally the cash flow projection said that it was going to start generating positive cash flow in 2028 and then being back in the black by 2031 was the original plan. That was based upon construction starting in 2024, which I don't think we're going to start seeing vertical construction this year, so it might not happen until 2025. So unfortunately, I think realistically, those valuations are probably going to be delayed a year. But like I said, the good news is at least the project is moving forward, and I mean, it's happening. So
What's the interest rate that the electric, the utility is lending to the TID?
3.82%.
Okay.
What's the potential for future development in this TID aside from what you just mentioned?
yeah, that's a good question. Well, getting the restaurant finished and up and running would be helpful. I know I met with them a few months ago. The developers are basically the people who own that building. It's like 2 or 3 partners. They live in the area. One's like a dentist or something in Lake Geneva or something. So they said they were committed to finishing that and getting a business in there. They have somebody that might be interested, but I mean, obviously that's been sort of stagnant for a while. So I'm a little skeptical about how quickly that'll happen, but at least they were still actively working on it. And especially now, if there's an $800,000 assessment that they're going to be paying taxes on, maybe that'll spur them to,
This is that partially finished building?
Yeah. So that's sort of most immediate. In terms of the other parcels in there, we did recently sign. So we had a pre-existing agreement with E&M, which was the developer out there. They were supposed to be marketing it, trying to get businesses in there. They were the ones that owned the hotel. They sold the hotel and they basically have left the area. They're doing projects in Chicago right now. So we have a new agreement with Anderson Commercial, who does a lot of our other properties. So they're technically marketing those properties right now. So cautiously optimistic that they'll be more proactive in trying to sell those properties. But, I will admit, we haven't really had a lot of interest in those particular parcels, and we've had a lot of interest in other city parcels, generally speaking. But in terms of the remaining TID parcels, we haven't had a lot of interest. So unfortunately, I don't have any great leads for you in terms of the 2 or 3 other parcels that are in there.
Realistically, it's going to be the Toronto being developed.
Yeah.
Not getting it, they'll generate the revenue.
Yeah. Once you suddenly have residential, now it makes sense to do commercial.
Yeah.
So is everything possible being done to help them get that going?
Yes. Yes. The amount of, when I say we have marshaled every single city resource, it's no exaggeration. We've been meeting with them, if they want to meet every Friday, which we were doing for a while as like a hot topic, how do we, where are we at? What do we need to do? We were doing that. Anytime they send us anything for engineering review, then our city engineer bumps it to the top of the priority list. Our zoning administrator does as well. I know.
Because it's something I hear consistently, is that there is just not any residential housing inventory around here. And that even people that work in the area and would love to live here, it's just not possible for them because they're either overpaying for a crummy apartment because there's no inventory and so they can charge, pretty much way more than what their property should be, or there's nothing to buy either. So, being able to have that development up, I think could spur a lot of stuff, bring some attention to the southern part of town that, fortunately things are starting to roll in the right direction. On the northern part of town, it would be nice. I think that development would help a ton, so.
Yeah, so like I said, the creek side, again, the amount of, we've constantly made it a top priority. when, for example, even giving them the interim grading permit so they could start moving dirt out there, we bent over backwards to do that. I mean, because realistically, they, really should have gotten their final SIP approval before they started moving dirt out there. But not to say you can't do an interim grading permit, but I'm just saying it was like, hey, how do we help you get started on doing whatever you can now? And so that was the interim grading permit. So we got that to them. So yeah, we're doing everything we can to push that, or not push it, but to support the project. So
So you think they'll have like basements in kind of thing before the end of the year?
that was their hope. Whether it happens or not, I can't
Yeah.
promise. It just depends on how quickly. I mean, because obviously we are now in July and we haven't gotten their specific implementation plan yet for planning commission approval, and that, they generally should be giving us like a month before they want.
Right.
So realistically, if we don't get that,
In August.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Do you have an estimated tax valuation or revenue generation when that is put in
for the,
for Atronomy as they do their phases?
hey, which phase are you talking about?
Well, as you look at, because I know they have a 10-year plan last time I recall.
Yep.
That it's going to take 10 years before it's fully completed. So I don't know, have you been able to look at, okay, as they go through, here's the estimated tax revenue that would be generated over time and projected how that impacts the TID?
Yeah, and that's, Ellers gave us some numbers last year, and that was kind of the 2028 was when we thought the TID would start to break even in terms of
Breaking even and
from
going for, okay.
increment, but then in terms of actually paying off the loans back to the, paying back the electric fund, that wouldn't happen until 2031 was the, estimate as of
Okay.
last year. But again, that was assuming the 24 construction, and their thought was that they would have more of a, building going up at this point. So we're definitely behind from that perspective. Yeah, and the only other caveat I'd say in terms of these cash flow projections from Ellers obviously were, I mean, there was assuming an overall valuation of $130 million, which was an estimate at the time. Teronomy had obviously given us sort of what their rough phasing plan was, but they kind of given us even recently differing explanations, or not explanations, but ideas as to what their phasing is going to be. So we're still a little, I think, in the dark as to what that ultimate phasing will be. So it may be, who knows, I hate to say, but.
So we don't know yet whether it's gonna be like 200 next year, or
Yeah,
they haven't given us an idea of how many they think, like by next summer, we think we're gonna have.
their goal was to do 2 or 3 residential buildings, apartment buildings at a time would be their, initial phase 1, which each building's got 77 units in it. So, I mean, they're big buildings. But then they also have to do the clubhouse as part of the beginning, and then they have to install the infrastructure. So their current idea was they wanted to do pretty much all the infrastructure development, except for maybe some of the roads, but wanted to get all the water sewer installed first, do those couple buildings, do the clubhouse as part of the first phase, and then phases 2 and 3 would be, the remaining buildings. But they just keep kind of giving us a little bit different answer. as
But
to-
no date as, and we think we'll have people living there by.
They would have originally said probably, like I said, if they were thinking 24, they would probably have been ready to move in by fall of 25 or something, but it could be more of a 26. I mean, it's just tough because I know they want to get done and they're thinking best case scenario. And certainly we want best case scenario, but then also realistically, this is a massive development. And what has kind of been a challenge for the last 6 months has been the water out there. They've had to put so much time and effort into designing the site and making sure that they're not going to impact, there's, not quite wetlands, but, they had to look at 100-year flood levels by the DNV. And then the east side of the development and the north side of the development. And then obviously we're working on the railroad crossing, and there's just a whole lot of different things that are kind of.
It's not
so-
good soils if the prior
Yeah,
Shinnick that was looking at that site, but the soil quality didn't allow them to put that large of a facility on. So if they're wanting to do the basement parking like they have in their other, that's a challenge.
so I know they're not going to do 2 levels of they're not going to do 2 underground levels of parking. It's going to be 1 level underground parking and then 1 above grade level parking, and then 4 stories on top of that. So
Do you have developer agreements now that are signed? I'm thinking I don't think we had them last year yet. So I don't know that they've been shared with us.
We will have to we'll check.
Yeah, if you
Let
could
know.
maybe
Yeah.
share that with all of us, I like to keep that on hand.
I have one final question, and this is something the rest of you probably already know. It will be information from me. The loans from the electric utility, why are they not required to be reported as a source of revenue in the PE 300 report?
Chris, great
That's
question.
That's actually a terrific question,
Yes, it is.
and one that I had not considered as I was looking through our general ledger. So we'll have to look into that and see, because I don't disagree with that.
Are you advancing it or transferring it? That's probably why.
Corey, maybe,
The funds are being transferred over, obviously, to pay, and it's being recorded in the balance sheet, I think, side, as far as the auditors have.
So it's an advance, which means it's only on the balance sheet, so it's not going to show up there. If they were transferring it over, then you'd see it as a revenue source.
Sounds like you guys got it figured out.
Yeah, sounds like good, yeah.
It's a cash thing only.
Let's see, Guy had kind of started, if you want to finish on.
One other thing, Guy, doing that last thing, when you're talking about the residential development side, I could talk more about that after the meeting, just because it's not technically on the agenda, so I don't want to dovetail, but I could tell you, I can give you updates about what's happening on the residential side, just for information purposes.
Yeah, no, that was really the only driver of my question was that I know their schedule. I also know that they have a lot of other irons in the fire, so I think that we have to work it on both sides, right? Make sure that we're doing, the city's doing everything that they can to, remove as many barriers as reasonably possible, but also verify that they see the project as a priority. I would assume they do, but I know they got a lot of stuff going on, so.
Well, and you're completely right, and that was why it was a goal of ours to try and get the project through, because we didn't want them to move on to a different community. I know they have.
Squirrel, we're gonna go work on this one now.
Exactly, so, and that's partly why for us, actually starting to see dirt moving and machinery out there, and I know they recently closed on the financing for the project, so, to me, those are all signs that, obviously they're committed to it at this point, so,
And they're still thinking 848 units.
yes, yeah.
Scheduling the date for next year's meeting?
I'd suggest we wait until next year, only because I don't know about the rest of you. I don't set my vacations until a little bit closer, but
You guys, are you okay with doing it in June-ish, or is there a better time of the year I mean, it's nice for us, because then we're not in the midst of budget season, and we've got the July 1, obviously, report we have to file, but.
That's fine. I would just, yeah, we wait until next year, but not the last week of June.
a little sooner in June.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we tried it once and then it didn't.
I usually have like my leftover vacation days.
Oh,
Yeah.
School year.
Because I'm losing them, so, yeah.
But we'll try for early June then.
Motion adjourned.
So moved.
Thank you all for coming and coming in person. It's good to see you.